Damrada, alone as he watched over one of the 8 gates, couldn't help but wonder. Why did it turn out like this? Things couldn't be any worse. Yuki had fallen into the hands of Emperor Ludora, deprived of his free will like all of his friends. Ludora had ordered Damrada to watch over them all, and he was in no position to defy him. Now, however, Ludora had given another order. Yuki would be watched by someone else, and once the handover was done, he was to board the Emperor's flagship. So began that great air battle. Single digits rank 6 or higher were allowed to learn the true identity of the marshal, but they could tell no one else. That was an absolute order, the information so vitally confidential that Damrada, his business frequently took him to foreign lands, had his memories manipulated for extra security. Yes, I made a promise to him. And that was. Damrada recalled it once he saw the marshal reveal herself. Many more memories followed, coming back vividly. He had previously recalled the most important promise he had made to Ludora, but now he remembered the reason it was so important to execute on it. Well, now what? There was no time to stew over it. The Demon Lord Rimuru, whom he had seen not long ago, was a very nice person, one who didn't seem much of a threat. Once he was captured in Velgrynd's alternate dimension, he shouldn't have been able to interfere with their measures to capture Ludora. And now, indeed, Ludora was completely dominated, giving Ludora a decisive advantage over Guy. But this was of no importance to Damrada. Or to Ludora, even. With a clarity of thought that felt like a thick fog being lifted, Damrada began wondering what was truly best for Ludora. But before he could answer that question, the Demon Lord Rimuru made his move truly unprecedented violence. Why did he ever think he wasn't a threat? Damrada wished he could interrogate himself over that. The fact he made it out of Velgrynd's seal made it no doubt that he was a force to be reckoned with. But more than that, the moment Damrada saw Rimuru appear, he realized just how naive he had been. The Demon Lord had taken one look at him and the rest with his golden eyes. It was a glare, a cold one, as if he didn't even recognize Damrada as his enemy. Kondo immediately stepped up to respond, but his attack didn't work. Is that all you have? Then I don't even need to be wary of you. All of you can wait for later. Have fun being terrorized. And try not to get killed until I can deal with you. That was the story Rimuru's eyes seemed to tell. To him, Damrada and the others were as good as dead already. Emperor Ludora was no exception to this. If things kept going this way, they'd all doubtlessly be killed. But what did tactical victory mean for Rimuru in this situation? It meant fulfilling 2 conditions. 1. Recapture Ludora. 2. Eliminate the invaders. Ludora was the Demon Lord's staunchest ally. For Rimuru, him losing his free will couldn't be allowed to stand. If he had come all the way over here, he must have been prepared to deal with Velgrynd, and from Damrada's point of view, there was no predicting the outcome of that battle. It was a vast contest in some far-off land, and he had no way of analyzing it. So what about eliminating the invaders? People called Rimuru a pacifist, but that didn't make him non-violent. His lands had been subject to numerous invasions in the past, and he had repelled all of them by any means he saw fit. Thanks to Ludora's help, the land of monsters had a long string of victories. Rimuru would never forgive the Empire's acts of aggression. The time for negotiation was over. For him, the only course of action was to kill every single Imperial soldier. Bargaining in the face of this was meaningless. The only way out was to fight to the bitter end. Even worse, they had signed no previous agreement over this war, which meant there was no guarantee that surrender would bring forgiveness. The Empire, seeing no point in such actions, set a trap for Rimuru when he came to negotiate. Their trust was ruined, and it could be concluded that no further talks would ever be agreed to. We should have made much more of an effort to stop His Majesty. Damrada realized the Empire's fatal miscalculation. Rimuru's power now threatened Emperor Ludora's life. Haunted by a secret promise, Damrada despaired. He yearned to fulfill his duty, yet defeating the invincible slime felt like a hopeless, impossible dream. Damrada shivered a bit as he analyzed the issue. Their flagship had been surrounded by terrifying magic, with the survivors now protecting the 8 gates. Could you really call this fighting as equals? Because to him, this looked like nothing but a dreadful error. That brought us to now. Did I keep you waiting? Before Damrada's eyes was a young girl, smiling happily. She was one of the 7 primal demons, one bearing unbelievable strength, Ultima, servant of the Demon Lord Rimuru. He has primals serving under him, and he's even granted them power. She was an even more awesome sight up close. The accuracy and power of that fearsome death streak was far beyond what it used to be, proving that the demons had indeed been evolved. Rimuru had opened a massive gate to summon them all, not even caring about all the eyewitnesses, and then he did something to everyone there. There had been no time to investigate exactly what, but Ultima had now given them a firm answer. The demon looked amused with herself. Ah ha 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 ha. You figured it out, huh? Well, that's right. Sir Rimuru gave me a bunch of power, and now I'm feeling really good. It was a nice anecdote for Ultima. To Damrada, it was his worst nightmare. Giving power to a primal, there was no way a mere demon lord could do that, as much as he predicted it himself. Not even Geek Crimson had evolved the primals under his control, which made clear just how extraordinary the Demon Lord Rimuru's actions were. But that didn't stop Damrada from trying to defeat him. He had to fulfill his promise to Ludora, and as part of that, he was obliged to go all out against the demon Ultima. You know, I have not always strived for the very best. Even if I have to choose a much harder path, as long as I can fulfill my goal at the end, that's all that matters. Damrada stopped worrying. Even looking at Ultima and all the overwhelming force she boasted, he stood strong, never growing timid. Still up for this, huh? Of course. I am one of my master's knights, and I will show you my power to the fullest. Great. Can't wait. Let's get started then. Thus began the battle between Damrada, second ranked of the single digits, and the Pain Lord Ultima. Ultima chuckled as she observed Damrada. She could feel his power an incredible amount for a human being, and exceptional even as a saint. If she hadn't been evolved, this might not have been winnable for her. I know this. He's about equal with Hinata, huh? And she was like a natural enemy to all monsters, but it looks to me like this guy's honed himself purely against humans, and individual targets for that matter. His type certainly can be a nuisance. Ultima knew that people who improved and invented their own abilities, rather than have them granted by others, were a pain. Takura was a good example of that, someone who could use a seemingly boundless number of techniques to handle any situation in his way. Adapting and applying those skills was the secret to his strength, and to higher forms of existence like herself, it was an alien concept. Demons existed on a much higher plane of existence than people. All they needed to do was release a little magic force, and that itself became an attack. That was true of Ultima, who stood at the very top of the demon race. She was born an expert on magic manipulation, the perfect control of magic force, and she didn't have to work for it at all. Any wish she had instantly came true. That's what magic was, and no one could dare hope to compete against its overwhelming versatility. Until fairly recently, Ultima believed the only adversaries who could beat her were other primals or wild cards like true dragons. But this belief was mistaken, something she discovered during her battle with Velgrynd. She and her cohorts put up a good fight against her, despite being far outclassed. They even beat one of her separate bodies, although even that only had about 10% of Velgrynd's strength. At the same time, however, they discovered that using their power the wrong way could get them defeated by a lower-ranked opponent. The battles that followed offered a great many lessons. True dragons, already the most powerful beings in the world, exhibited highly precise, sophisticated magic manipulation that allowed them to fully overwhelm Ultima and the demonesses, despite their own magic skills. Ultima had no idea how Velgrynd pulled that off mid-battle, but now she did. The secret lay in applying an ultimate skill to your magic. An ultimate skill gives you a lot more precision over your magic control, right? No wonder we couldn't beat her at all. Velgrynd was doing little more than keeping the demonesses at bay, but even that was too much for Ultima to overcome back then. And for Carrere, a self-styled magic expert, seeing someone handle it so much better than her was a humiliation. Yes, a humiliation, but also a stroke of good luck. She enjoyed the opportunity to experience that battle, and she survived without tasting a decisive defeat. Never until now did Ultima consider that simply incorporating the effects of a skill into magic could potentially double its power. Now that this battle was behind her, she was quickly realizing some new possibilities. True, we've got a very good foundation, but that doesn't mean we should rely on it too much. A little innovation, and we can get even stronger. Ultima, as the strongest of them all, had never held much of a craving for power. This time, though, she sincerely wanted it for herself. As someone already near invincible strove for even greater heights through hard work and study, how much stronger could they get? The answer to this question probably lay in Velgrynd, her and Geek Crimson, no doubt. Along those lines, Diablo, constantly pursuing his own interests over anything else, was probably a wild card. It was completely different from Ultima and Carrere, who had never made an effort at anything before. Tensura was another story. Ultima was aware that she was the most inexperienced out of the 7 primals, but even so, she felt she could fight as an equal with Miseria Reign. When it came to Tensura and Carrere in a serious fight, though, she didn't like her chances. Tensura was perfect and elegant all the way. She was confident, even with her bad habit of looking down on others. Carrere was arrogant and sloppy, capable of perfection if she wanted it, but prone to losing interest and phoning it in instead. So what did that make Ultima? She couldn't control magic as precisely as Tensura, or throw around magic force the way Carrere could. Out of the 3 Devil Lords, she was probably bringing up the rear. Everything was just halfway there at best with her. She was a wellspring of talent, but she never enthusiastically applied herself to anything. In that way, she was similar to Carrere in many respects. That's why they competed as rivals for so long. But now Carrere had taken up a new hobby, swordsmanship. It only made Ultima jealous. But that would end today. Ultima was blessed with the opportunity to awaken, and now she had the power she wished for. And I'm the one with the most room for growth among us all, right? Now that she was thinking this way, it all seemed like a pretty funny story to her. It was all thanks to Rimuru, her master, and while Ultima had no idea how the Demon Lord could do that, it didn't matter to her. All that mattered was whether she could attain a higher plane of existence or not that, and whether she could prove useful to Rimuru.